Hello, hello. Welcome back to No Me Callo. I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin, and today we're diving into the third episode of a special series I created during January in recognition of Human Trafficking Awareness Month, a month dedicated to shedding light on a reality that we too often choose not to see, human trafficking. That's why this January I launched the series Unmasking Human Trafficking in Our Community, Desenmascarando el Tráfico Humano en Nuestra Comunidad, a series where every week I'm sharing conversations about this urgent issue, one that is too close to home, deeply rooted in our communities, and far too often silenced. So if you haven't listened to the previous episodes yet, I really invite you to go back and listen so you don't miss any important context and information. In episode 1, it really lays the foundation, helping us understand why this issue is not distant, not foreign, and not something that only happens in other countries or other communities. In episode 2, we went deeper into how human trafficking shows up and why so many times it goes unnoticed. And today, in this third episode, we continue moving this necessary conversation forward, giving voice to realities that have been silenced for far too long. They worked hard, not because they wanted to be heroes, not because they wanted to sacrifice themselves, but because they didn't have another option. They worked endless hours, 12 hours, 14, 16, days that started before the sun came up and ended long after everyone else had gone to sleep. They trusted promises of stability, of opportunity, of a different future for themselves or for their children. They were told, here, you'll finally get ahead. This job will change your life. But behind that job, there was control, there was fear, and there was abuse. So get ready, because today we're not going to talk about visible chains. We're not going to talk about people locked behind doors. Today, we're talking about something far more dangerous, something that gets normalized, something that gets justified, something society sometimes even praises by saying that's just hard work. Today, we're talking about labor trafficking. So maybe as you listen to this episode, you'll recognize someone, or maybe you'll recognize yourself. So you already know what to do. Get comfortable, grab your coffee, your cafecito, your glass of wine, or your cold beer, and get ready to chismear with me. So let's first start with, what is labor trafficking? When people hear the word trafficking, their minds often go straight to the extremes. Kidnappings, forced border crossings, immediate violence, people in chains. And yes, those can exist, but labor trafficking most of the time doesn't start there. And it tends to start much earlier. It starts in a place that feels harmless. It starts with a conversation with someone who recommends a job. And it could be a friend, a relative, an employer who seems like a good person. And they may say things like, I know someone who can help you. It's a safe job. Here, they really value you. And it starts with an offer that sounds too good or too necessary to turn down. And this is where I want you to pay close attention. Exploitation and labor trafficking are separated by a very thin line, a line that is often crossed without the person even realizing it. So why is it so easy to not notice? Because working is not illegal. Because accepting a job, even an unfair one, feels normal. Because no one ever says, I'm going to traffic you. They say, just hold on a little longer. That's how it is at the beginning. Everything will get better later. And little by little, what started as a demanding or unfair job turns into something much darker. Labor trafficking happens when someone is forced to work or continue working using fear as a tool. And not always with the physical violence, not always with yelling, often with silence, with disguised threats, with promises that never come. And it can involve direct or indirect threats, like if you talk, we'll call immigration. Deception about pay or working conditions, like we'll pay you later. That wasn't part of the agreement. Abuse of power or authority, like I decide when you work. Withholding documents, maybe your passport or your ID is safer with me. Imposed debts, you still owe us. Fear of migration, fear of losing children, fear of being left with nothing. And this is where exploitation crosses the line. Because you're no longer working out of necessity, and now you're working out of fear. Fear of consequences, fear of losing everything, fear that no one will believe you. And let me be clear, it doesn't matter if you have legal status or not. And it doesn't matter if you crossed the border or were born here. It doesn't matter if you signed something or accepted unfair conditions at the beginning. No one loses their rights because they work. If someone controls your time, your pay, your rest, your documents, your decisions, using fear, threats, or deception, that is not work. That is exploitation. And when that exploitation continues over time, when you can't leave, when you feel trapped, when fear is making your decisions for you, that is labor trafficking. And many times that person doesn't even realize it right away because the line is crossed slowly. One abuse at a time, one excuse at a time, one silence at a time. So let's move to the first story. It was only for a few months. And for safety reasons, I won't share names, but this person was 27 years old and had two small children. She was offered a job at a cleaning houses. They told her it would only be for a few months, just until she got settled, just until she saved enough money. And at first, it seemed normal. Everything appeared to be in order, the houses, the schedules, the task. It felt like something she could handle. But little by little, the rules began to change, slowly, so slowly that she barely noticed at first. She could no longer decide her own schedule. Mornings started before the sun came up, and nights stretched until the city was already asleep. She worked Monday through Sunday, no days off, no rest, and then the payments became very confusing, inconsistent. When she later asked about her money, she was told, later, not right now, there's nothing yet, and the tension grew. But something worse happened. They asked for her passport. They told her it's for safekeeping. They never gave it back. Suddenly, the freedom she thought she had was gone. Days blurred into endless weeks, and exhaustion became her constant companion. And not just physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion. She felt isolated, alone, trapped. When she tried to leave, the threat was clear. Do you want us to call immigration? Her fear grew. And she wasn't locked behind bars or chains, but she was trapped. And every step toward leaving felt impossible. And every attempt to escape was blocked by fear and coercion. And she began to realize that what she thought was a temporary job had become a trap, designed to keep her there, obedient, silent, and enduring. And the worst part, no one saw it. No one recognized it as human trafficking. They only saw a worker who couldn't keep up or who needed to hold on a little longer. This is also labor trafficking, sustained exploitation, constant threats, control over someone's life, using fear as a tool for obedience. And control doesn't always shout. As you can see from this story, control doesn't always come with physical violence. Sometimes it comes wrapped in phrases that sound harmless, phrases we hear in many workplaces and normalize without questioning them, like, that's just how it works here. Hang in there. We all go through it. But each of those phrases can be another rope tying you down. A subtle way for you to doubt yourself. Your right to say no, your right to rest, your right to demand justice. And it disguises itself as discipline, as loyalty, as sacrifice, as hard work. And many times the person trapped in it doesn't even recognize it as abuse. They accept it because they believe that this is just life, that this is just work. And it hides in places we see every day, places we consider normal and safe. Restaurants where servers work extra hours without fair pay, agricultural fields where farm workers live in unsafe conditions without access to basic services, construction sites where workers are forced into extreme schedules under threat of losing their jobs, cleaning and maintenance jobs where domestic workers are monitored, controlled, and isolated, factories that demand inhumane productivity throughout veiled threads, domestic caregiving where caregivers are treated as if they have no rights. In all of these places, exhaustion becomes routine and abuse becomes invisible. Think back to the story I just shared. Each phrase like, just hang in a little longer, or that's how it works here, was another drop filling a cup of fear, isolation, and exhaustion until it finally overflowed and trapped her. Exploitation doesn't always come with violence. More often, it comes through endless hours, delayed wages, withheld documents, and veiled threads. It's the constant pressure, the physical and emotional wear, the feeling that there's no way out. Control can be quiet. It can be a whisper telling you that you are not free, that your rights don't matter, and that your voice doesn't count. And that is what makes it so dangerous and so hard to detect. So let's move to the second story. The more he worked, the more he owed. And for safety reasons, again, I won't share their name, but this person arrived from Mexico with a debt. He didn't arrive with criminal intentions. He didn't arrive trying to break the law. He arrived with fear, with need, and with hope. He arrived believing that if he worked hard enough, things would get better. They told him he had to pay for the crossing, the food, housing, And at first, nothing really sounded strange. Nothing sounded illegal. It just sounded like it's something he had to do. And they told him, that's how it works. Everyone pays that, and it's only at the beginning. And at first, the debt had a number, a big number, but one that felt not that impossible. So he thought, maybe the more that I work, the faster I'll get out of this. So he worked more, long days, days that started before sunrise and ended when his body could barely move. And each week he worked even more. But every week when he asked how much he still owed, something didn't add up. The debt didn't go down, it grew. Rent was added, food was added, transportation was added, this was added, and that was added. And he began to realize that no matter how much he worked, it was never enough. It never ended. And exhaustion became permanent. Fear began to grow. And when he asked if he could look for another job, the answer was, and how are you going to pay for what you owe? When he asked if he could leave, not until you pay off your debt. And the debt stopped being a number. It became an invisible change. And there were no bars, no locks, but there was control. And there was veiled threads. There was a fear of losing shelter, fear of losing food, fear of retaliation. And he was no longer working to earn money. He was working to survive. And I'll say it again, to survive. He was working to try to reduce a fear that never went away. This was labor trafficking. And it is illegal. But it continues to happen, and many times it happens right in front of us, without us naming it for what it truly is. So fear can be a tool of control. And after hearing the second story, something should be clear. This person was not locked up with chains. There was no armed guards watching every move like you see it in the movies. But this person was living as if he was in a cage, and that cage had a name, fear. Fear is one of the most powerful tools used in labor trafficking, more effective than any punch, more silent than any chain. In this case, fear showed up every single day in many different ways. Fear of the police because he was told that if he spoke up, he would be the one who ended up arrested. Fear of immigration because they constantly reminded him, you don't have papers, and if you leave here, you'll be deported. Fear of losing everything because even though he had no money, even though he had no freedom, he still held on the illusion that one day the debt would end. And that one day kept him working. Fear of not being believed because who would believe them? The more he worked, the more he owed. From the outside, he just looked like another hard worker. Fear of ending with nothing, no job, no roof, no food, no options. That fear didn't appear overnight. It was built slowly. First, it was a warning, then a threat disguised as advice, then a constant reminder of how vulnerable he was. Remember where you come from. Be grateful you have a job. No one here is going to help you. And little by little, fear started doing the dirty work for them. They didn't need to watch him. They didn't need to lock him in because he started watching himself. He measured every word, every movement, every thought. He woke up with fear. He worked with fear. He went to sleep with fear. And that is labor trafficking. When fear controls your decisions, when fear forces you to stay, when fear replaces your freedom. Traffickers don't need chains when fear does the work for them. And the most dangerous thing about fear is that from the outside, no one sees it. From the outside, the person looked free, but on the inside, he was completely trapped. So these are some of the phrases that you should be really alarmed. And if you hear them, you should stop and listen carefully, because these words are not normal. They are not part of a job, they are not fair rules, and they are not discipline. They are warnings. You can't miss work. Even if you're sick, even if your body is shaking from exhaustion, even if you have fever, pain, or fear, because here your health doesn't matter, production does. Don't talk to anyone, because silence protects the abuser, because isolation breaks support networks, because the fewer people you know, the less help you can ask for, and the more alone you become. Will hold on to your ID, not to protect you, not to help you, but to take away your options, to control your movement, to decide when you exist and when you don't. If you leave, there will be consequences. Consequences they never explain, consequences that don't need any words, because fear does all the work. Immigration, the police, losing your children, ending with nothing, sleeping on the street. And when you hear these phrases every day, something starts to happen inside you. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to obey without questioning. You begin to normalize the unacceptable, and you begin to think that maybe you deserve it. And that's when work stops being work. That is not employment. It is not sacrifice. It is not just how things are. That is control. And when control is constant, when it uses fear, threats, and isolation, when it slowly takes away your freedom, That is labor trafficking. And silence does not protect. And if you're listening to this and something inside you shifted, if a phrase sounded painfully familiar, and if you felt a knot in your stomach or a heaviness in your chest, this message is for you. Many people were told no one is going to help you. You don't have any rights. If you speak up, things will get worse. And I want you to hear this clearly. That is a lie. All people have rights, every single one. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. It does not matter your age, your language, your immigration status, where you were born. You do not deserve exploitation. You do not deserve abuse. And you do not deserve to live in fear. Silence was never meant to protect you. Silence protects the trafficker. And it protects the systems that take advantage of your need and of your hope. Many people stay silent because they believe they have no choice, because someone convinced them that they were alone, that no one would believe them, that it wasn't worth trying. But I want to tell you something important. There is help. There are people who will believe you, and there are organizations that exist for exactly this reason. You don't need proof. You don't need to tell your entire story all at once, and you do not have to do this alone. Asking for help does not make you weak. Speaking up does not make you ungrateful, and surviving does not make you guilty. If you're a man and we're told, tough it out, that is just how it works. Men don't complain. That is not true. Your dignity matters too. If you are a woman and we're made to believe that you should be grateful for any job, any treatment, any abuse, that is not true. You deserve respect. And if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community and someone used your identity, your orientation, or your fear of rejection to control you, that is not your fault. And you are not alone. Human trafficking feeds on silence, but it weakens when we speak. And maybe today you can't speak out loud. Maybe just listening to this episode was an act of courage, and that counts. Remember this, abuse is not work. Control is not normal, and silence does not protect you. There is help. There is a way out, and your life is worth far more than any debt, any threat, or any fear. So I wanted to share some resources before we end this episode. If you or someone you know is experiencing human trafficking, abuse, or a situation that just doesn't feel right, there is help. And they do not ask about immigration status. You do not need to have all the answers, and you do not have to report to law enforcement to receive support. Sometimes the first step is simply talking to someone who knows how to listen. And here are some important resources. There's a National Human Trafficking Hotline. This hotline exists for exactly this reason, to listen, to guide, and to help you think through safe options. The number is 888-373-7888. Again, that's 888-373-7888. And it's available 24/7 in multiple languages. You can call for yourself, you can call for someone else, or you can call just to ask questions. There is always the DHS Blue Campaign. The Department of Homeland Security is an educational and community-based resource where you can learn how to identify signs of human trafficking, what to do if you suspect a situation, and how to take action without putting yourself at risk. There's also human trafficking task forces, more than 50 across the country. They are specialized teams made of service providers, victim advocates, prosecutors, trained law enforcement, and they work with a survivor-centered, trauma-informed approach, not punishment. You can find a task force near you using the Office of Victims of Crime map, and this map connects you to local help and people who understand your community and your resources. As well, here in Lake County, Illinois, this does happen here, and yes, there is support. We have the Lake County Human Trafficking Task Force, a multidisciplinary team responding to labor and sex trafficking cases with a trauma-informed approach. This task force is a collaboration between the Lake County State's Attorney's Office and A Safe Place. I will also be sharing about Lake County Coalition Against Human Trafficking, a network of organizations and community members committed to prevention, education, and response. You can find us on Facebook. And then there's a Safe Place from Lake County, an organization providing comprehensive support to survivors, including crisis services, referrals, housing assistance, legal support, therapy, and much more. They do have a 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis line. The number is 800-600-7233. Again, that is 800-600-7233, and it's available in multiple languages. And lastly, I did want to talk briefly about law enforcement. Talking to the police does not mean you lose control. You can share information, provide tips, report anonymously. And giving a tip does not force you to file a report. It does not require you to testify, and it does not require you to expose yourself. Sometimes one piece of information opens an investigation. Sometimes your voice helps protect someone else. And if you're not ready or don't feel safe, talking to law enforcement, that is okay. Help does not have just one path. And I want to close with this. Human trafficking, both labor and sex trafficking, thrives on isolation, and it thrives on silence. But it weakens when we share information, when we seek help, when we remember that dignity is not negotiable. If something in this episode resonated with you, trust that feeling. Don't ignore it. There is support, there are resources, and there are people who believe you. You are not alone. And before we close this episode, I want to take a moment to breathe and listen to this with an open heart. Because if something you heard today made you uncomfortable, if something hurt, if something made you think of someone you know or of yourself, that was not an accident. Abuse does not always leave visible bruises. Sometimes it leaves chronic exhaustion, constant fear, silence. Sometimes it disguises itself as an opportunity, as hard work, as a necessary sacrifice. But it isn't. Abuse is not work. Control is not discipline, is not authority, and is not normal. When someone decides for you your time, your body, your wages, your voice, that is not employment. Control is not normal. And silence was never meant to take care of you. It was never meant to protect you. Silence protects the trafficker, and it protects the system that profits from need. It protects those who believe they can continue abusing without consequences. Silence does not protect. And if today you only listen, that already matters. If today you recognize the sign, that is the first step. And if today you thought this shouldn't be happening, trust that voice, because you deserve dignity, you deserve rest, and you deserve safety. And no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter your status, your life has value. Your story matters, and your voice has power. In the description of this episode, you'll find the Amazon link with the full list of books mentioned today in No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet, from the very first episode to today's. And you'll also find the resources I shared today, including the OVC Human Trafficking Task Force map, the Lake County Human Trafficking Task Force, the Lake County Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and A Safe Place in Lake County. And don't forget, there's a new episode waiting for you every Friday. Next episode in the series is called Silence Voices Surviving Sexual Trafficking. Voces silenciadas, sobrevivir el tráfico sexual. In the next episode, we will open stories that rarely come to light. Survivors who were sexually exploited, forced into silence, threatened, and isolated, yet still found the strength to resist and rebuild their lives. We will also clarify something many people confuse: the difference between prostitution and sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is never a choice. It involves coercion, control, deception, and exploitation. Prostitution, when truly voluntary, is a personal decision. We'll also talk about how men can be victims too, and how trafficking doesn't always start with a stranger abducting someone. Many times it begins with someone close, someone who appears trustworthy and hides danger behind a smile. We'll explore how sexual exploitation begins subtly before a person realizes what's happening. Warning signs we often ignore because they seem normal or acceptable. How traffickers use fear, manipulation, isolation, and false promises to maintain control. Real survivor stories of breaking the silence and reclaiming freedom. This episode will challenge what you think about consent, about freedom and human dignity. And it will open your eyes to how exploitation can happen closer than we think, in our own communities, and remind us that silence only allows it to continue. So don't miss it, and please help me by sharing these episodes to raise awareness about this horrific crime that is human trafficking. You were listening to No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin. Until next time.